despite what you're going to talk about, what happened, I think you could probably even say you probably still did learn some things maybe.
You eat it, and that's all I did for the first 2 years was eat all of my mistakes. It's the best school you can get.
Instead of it being reasons why you fell, it's reasons why you're sitting here successful.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the FIP Printing Pros podcast. I'm your host, Josh Steinison. Again, as always, I've got Chris Lockwood, my co-host, with me. And today we got one of my friends here, Chayton the Goose Geeson.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you coming out. So Goose, as I call him, Chayton's technically your name, but I call you Goose and everybody pretty much calls you Goose.
Yeah, like I was saying before, everything. There are people that don't know I have another name. They think Goose is written on my birth certificate.
So Goose, you own CBI Construction.
Yep.
And basically, tell me if I'm wrong, the main thing that you guys do is you manufacture and build homes.
Yeah. So custom new home construction and remodels at the moment, yeah.
And then I know, we've talked a while back too, you also were going to get into consulting as well. Are you doing that or?
Yeah, I've got 3 LLCs technically. One for property, real estate investment, one for consulting, and then one for contracting. So,
okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Mainly contracting. The other 2 are just kind of running in the background. We do a couple things here and there with them, but mainly just to get as much tax benefits as we can, So,
hey, I get that.
Yep. So, yeah.
And also you're not former, always a Marine. Sorry.
I forget. No. I did 4 years. I got out 2018, so 2014 to 2018. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, why don't you, I guess, start from, a little bit of beginning about your story, your journey, like between time in the military and then how you got into business and kind of your little storyline and how that kind of came about.
So I was, I've been building or working for builders since I was 12 years old. I started digging ditches.
Nothing like starting a story on child labor, right?
Yeah, exactly. I always wanted to make money. So, first job I could get, I went out and did it. And I'd always been around it. My dad was in construction for as much as I could remember. And then, again, everybody that I really resonated with in the little town that we lived in was in construction. So ended up working for a couple of different contractors.
Where was this at?
In Indian Lake, New York, in the middle of nowhere, upstate New York, nowhere near the city. So don't come at me.
Rural.
Yeah, exactly. Way up in the mountains, close to Canada. So anyway, I did that for, as long as I can. It's my first job, right? So I did that all the way up until I graduated high school. I went and did 1 semester at college for construction management and civil engineering, and got a bill and said, I can't pay for that. So immediately said, you know what, somebody else will pay for this, and did little to no research at all, and then joined the Marine Corps. So, just the only research I did was a buddy of mine that I graduated high school with joined the Marine Corps. So I knew that if I joined any other branch, he would make fun of me. So I just said, all right, I'm going to go join the Marine Corps. And that was it. I signed up in January 28th, and I left for boot camp February 27th.
That's just like me.
Yep,
I left within 11 days.
Yep.
Did they give you a bonus?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, for leaving quicker?
Well, yes and no. I had signed up for another job, and my ship date was like 6 months away.
Oh, okay.
And then they were like, hey, I know you said you wanted to get out of that town. You can leave next week and I can give you a bonus, but you got to take a different job. I said, all right, do it. Let's do it. I'll go drive trucks. So I took a contract to go drive trucks and did that for 4 years. So that was.
So we call that 88 Mike in the Army. What is it?
It's 3531 is our MOS number, whatever you want to call it. But 3531, and then mechanics are 21. So, but yeah, I did that for 4 years. I had a really great career there. Super skate, it was like the easiest 4 years of my life. I got really cool jobs. I got to work with a lot of really cool people. We can go into detail on that another one. I don't want to get too washed up in the weeds on that, but that was a lot of fun. But then towards the end, I decided, you know what, this is getting a little bit too political for me. I'm going to go ahead and end it here instead of because once you do the first re-enlistment, you pretty much got to stay for the rest. You know what I mean? Once you get
what year did you join?
2014.
2014.
Yeah, so it was end of Obama, and then Trump, I think, was just elected right as I was getting out or something like that.
Yep.
If I remember the timelines correctly. I know most of it was Obama, though. So it was, but yeah, so it was getting a little bit ridiculous. I decided to get out, and then took the first job I could when I got out, doing trim here in the villages. I was installing for a trim company down there, and absolutely astonished at the way that things are built down here. Much different than where I'm from up in the mountains, right?
What do you mean? How's that?
So in the mountains or up in New York, when I worked for the contractors, we built the entire house start to finish. There was a couple of subcontractors, so we had an electrician, we had a heating guy, and a plumber, but like everything else was in-house in one company, right? So we did all the concrete foundation work, we dug everything, all the excavation, concrete, we would frame everything, then we do siding, roof, windows, doors, drywall, flooring, cabinets, all of it was just one group of guys that you worked with.
So what was the difference there? Is it because of the volume or?
Yeah, it's less volume up there, because there are developments up there, but where I'm from specifically, there's not a lot of space to build, because of the mountains. You can't put a development up on the side of a mountain easily. So
tell them that in Tennessee.
Yeah. So where I'm at though, also there was a bunch. We're in the Adirondack Park, which is a regulated space, and there's a bunch of political stuff there too, where they're trying to get you not to do anything. Like they don't even want new homes built.
Regulations.
There. They fight with you all the time on it. So it turns a lot of people away. But yeah, so essentially one crew would build it start to finish, and it would take quite a bit longer than most of the little houses go up down here, and everything was 100% custom. So we cared a lot about the finished product up there. So when I get down here, and the village is a perfect example of get in and get out and be done, and the lack of quality. Don't get me wrong, there are some communities in the villages that do a really good job, but for the most part, it was, this guy messed up, cover it up and move on and just keep going. If the framer screwed it up, the siding guy's going to come in and just do his best to get around it, and then that's it. Then nobody goes back and fixes the initial issue. So by the time you're done with the house, you got all these, the details just aren't there, right? So I was not used to that. And so when I came down and saw all that, and I saw, all these people making all this money, I was like, come on, man, I can do that. Like, I can do way better than them. Why am I not doing that? And also the company that I was with had an issue with the manager that was in charge of me. He was into drugs and alcohol and all this stuff. So there was a lot of times when I'd drive down to his house to go to work, and then he would, it was like 45 minutes from where I was living. So I'd get there, and then we'd wait there for 15, 20 minutes, and he'd say, I'm sick today, just go home. So then I've just wasted 2 hours of my morning driving there, driving back, and I didn't get paid for any of it, So I was getting tired of that. So I left that and went to another company in town that does soil engineering and stuff. And it was kind of like they sold the job to me like any recruiter does, right? Just like the Army or Marines or whatever. They tell you, hey, listen, benefits, you get this, that. And I went, it's a really good idea for my family, right? I'm gonna get a company vehicle, I'm gonna get overtime pay, I'm gonna get health benefits, all this stuff.
Were you married at the time?
Yes, I was married. Sorry. Yeah, we were married. And actually she wasn't down here yet. When we got out of the Marine Corps, she went back to New Hampshire to be with her family while I tried to buy a house so she could move down here, right? So
how'd you get here? Like what brought you to Florida?
Yeah, okay, I probably should have went back and said that. So, yeah, I'm originally from New York. My wife's from New Hampshire. We came down here because when we were getting out, it's not like this anymore, but it was much cheaper to live here. You could get a house for $150,000, really nice house, and be set, right? And that's what we could afford with our VA home loan and all that. And then looking up north, the same size house on smaller, land or whatever was like double to triple that, and it just didn't make sense. It's also, I was tired of working in the cold, being in construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, man,
Hazard pay.
If I'm going back and doing anything in construction, I'm not going to be chipping ice off my gloves every 20 minutes. So we did the research. We found a good school for my wife who was going to use her GI Bill to go back to school. And my sister had lived here already. So we started looking in this area. It just happened that way.
Gotcha.
So yeah, we came down. I did that first job while I was looking for a house. So I signed up with that job and was able to get all of the financing, find a house, and close within less than 30 days with a VA home loan, which is like next to impossible. But I'm a nightmare to lenders, man. They hate me. I'm asking them every single second of the day, what do you need from me? What's going on? Why isn't this done yet? But also because my wife wasn't here, you know what I mean? I wanted to get a house so we could, start our life together. So I got all that done. And the day that we closed on the house, I quit and started with that soil company, thinking that it was a better opportunity for us. I was going to make more money. I was going to have benefits, blah, blah, blah. While my wife was in school, everything would be taken care of. And that was an absolute nightmare. It was another one of those things where you get in there and you go, wow, you guys are getting away with this? And people are paying you for this? And I was just uncomfortable with it. You know, it wasn't everything that it was supposed to be. It was nice to have a company vehicle and overtime pay and all that, but it wasn't. The rest of it was just, I was sitting in a truck all day watching other people work, and I get antsy when that happens, you know? Like, that's probably a dream job for somebody else. But for me, I'm like, I can't be sitting here doing this. It's killing me. Did that for a little bit, and then while I was working there, I had all the time in the world. So I brought my computer to work every day and started researching, starting businesses. And again, watching all of these people do this work down here to, less than the standard that I would provide and make a ton of money, or at least what I thought they were making a ton of money. It took a long time to figure all that out. But anyway, that's all that I needed. And I said, all right, I'm gonna start working on this. I got all the paperwork figured out, all the research done, picked a name, registered, all that, and started my first company. Yeah, that was an absolute mistake. The first one, well, you learn, and that's all it was. It was a giant learning experience. So.
And at that time, for that business, you weren't building houses, were you?
I was because
you weren't a general contractor.
Was not a contractor, and that's a whole thing in itself that I've recently learned. But so in New York, you don't have to be a licensed contractor to build a house, which again is something different than down here, which I didn't know. So I started this company, and as I was getting all the paperwork, I did all the research, and I was like, okay, I'm not allowed to build houses. All I'm allowed to do is like trim work and painting, right? Those are the only two things you're allowed to do.
Nothing structural.
Nothing structural, nothing with electrical, nothing with plumbing, nothing with AC, right? So literally just trim, flooring, painting. I mean, I couldn't do anything else. So technically, I'm not even allowed to advertise as a remodeler, because when you're remodeling and you pull out a kitchen sink, you're doing plumbing or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're redoing kitchen cabinets and you have to do sinks or bathrooms or whatever. So basically,
move an outlet.
Exactly. Yeah. Even if it's minor, you know what I mean? It's still technically you need a permit for it, and you could get in trouble for it.
Well, also something you taught me that I didn't realize. Not that I want to put this necessarily out there for the people to take advantage of necessarily, but when you're not fully technically licensed, you really have no footing to stand on if somebody doesn't pay you. Is that?
Oh no, 100%. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I thought that's what you told me.
And it's both sides too. So like, if you were to say I did a job that I wasn't legally allowed to do, and there was an issue with the homeowner, and they decided not to pay me, I cannot take them to court and tell the judge, hey, I did their shower. I tore all the shower out, redid the plumbing, redid all the tile work, and it's exactly what they asked for, but they're not paying me. I want my money. There's nothing that I can do because I'm not licensed to do that work, right? So not only am I not allowed to come after them for money, but if I were to rip off the homeowner and leave, they're legally not allowed to come after me, or legally, they technically, you can go after anybody, but the court does not have to rule in their favor because I wasn't licensed.
They hired someone.
They hired somebody unlicensed. So that's the whole thing with Florida.
So you said that first business was a mistake. Why do you say it was
a mistake? Well, let me rephrase that. It's not a mistake. It was a learning experience, right? But again, I didn't know all this stuff. So all I was able to do is pretty much advertise as a handyman. right? And in my experience now, when you advertise as a handyman, you get people that are trying to get high-end or nice stuff done for real cheap, right?
Yeah.
So, because everybody in the world will put on any of the Facebook pages and stuff, hey, I need a handyman to redo my bathroom. Legally, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for a contractor, a licensed contractor.
Yeah.
But when you say handyman, that's what I did for, I did it for 2.5 years. And I did do all that stuff that I was not legally allowed to do. I just did it correctly and, to where I was confident there wasn't going to be an issue. But that's what I did was when I'm advertising as a handyman, you get subpar requests is what I would say. Subpar clientele, right? At least not what I was looking for. I wasn't looking to get in, get out, slam something together and move on. I like to do stuff the right way. And so, when I'm doing that, they're constantly beating me up on my price, right? So I'll send a bid in and they'll say, oh man, I had 2 other guys bid this and they came in $1,000, $2,000 less. And I was so inexperienced with business ownership that I just said, yep, absolutely, I'll meet that price and we'll come out and do it. Not knowing my numbers, not knowing anything on the back end, that I legitimately was just losing money, right?
Yeah.
So consistently I would have to take money from this bathroom remodel and make sure that they paid me so that I could get the materials for the next one and pay my guys. And, they had already given me a deposit. So I'm always behind, you know what I mean? So that's, when I learned that the license makes a huge difference, especially here in Florida. And then, I didn't know anything about pricing. I didn't know anything about like scheduling or sales or any of it. And also when I first started, it was just me. So I would, more often than not, if there was something that I hadn't done, right? So if somebody wanted a backsplash, this is a perfect story because I did exactly this. A guy called me and said, hey, I want a backsplash. Can you do a backsplash? And I said, yep, let me come out and look at it. So I go out there, measured everything up. I went home that night and I Googled,
How do you put in a backsplash?
how do you do a backsplash? What should the price on a backsplash be? You know what I mean? All the steps. And then I sent him an estimate and he he goes, hey, that looks great, but could you do it for this much cheaper, right? And I said, absolutely. I need the work. I'm going to go do it. And it was a pretty decent sized, average kitchen backsplash, with an L shape. So there's 2 walls to do, good amount of space there. And I think I did the whole thing, materials included, for like $600, right? Yep, absolutely ridiculous. So I bought his tile for him, brought it out there. The tile was like $200 plus the thin set, plus I had to buy a tile saw because I didn't have one yet because I hadn't done it before and like all this. And then I spent my meticulous self, I spent like 4 days there, right? But when I was done, it was pristine. Lost, I don't even know how much. I never went back and figured out exactly how much money I lost, but a ridiculous amount. But that was how I managed the business for the first couple months when I was by myself, is I would somebody would ask me to do something, I would Google it, and then I would do it. So I learned a lot really quick that way, because I had been in construction long enough to understand all of it, right? Just because I hadn't installed tile before didn't mean that I wasn't confident enough to do it after seeing it done. You know what I mean? That's how it's been my whole life. If, for framing, I would watch a wall get put together, and then I'd frame the rest of the house. Like I caught on pretty quick to all that. Just because I'd been around it, right? So I wasn't nervous in that aspect. I just, every time, and even today too, every time I would price out a job, I was like, oh man, they're going to say no, and they're going to, yeah. And then once I got employees, it got even worse because I needed the work to pay them, right? So no matter what, I'd send a price, and whatever they said, I just said yes to and went and did the work. And so I was constantly, backfilling my own problems, and there was 1 or 2 or 3 jobs, occasionally that would hit, and I would make a ton of money on them, and it would save me for a little bit. I'd get back out of the hole, but that's what the first 2.5 years of my business were, learning all of that, what the labor costs, what the materials cost, how much time it's going to take to do a specific task, and in remodels, you learn that there's no such thing as a smooth remodel. You're always going to run into something, and if you don't have a clause in the contract, or you don't have that written out or priced out or built into your price, for those types of contingencies, you eat it. And that's all I did for the first 2 years, was eat all of my mistakes. It's the best best school you can get, the best education you can get, unfortunately.
Or you have the owners that come in with the change, the changes they want.
Yeah, and then not charging for those changes, Yep, all of that stuff. Yeah, they bought the material, but, it took us an extra day, but I said, whatever, you buy the material, we'll take care of it. So, yeah, all of that stuff. I learned all of that I didn't learn all of it in 2 years, but I consistently failed over 2 years, to the point where I met, I had a really good crew, and we were able to produce high quality work, but I didn't have a license, so I couldn't do the work that we wanted to do. Yeah. So towards the end of it, the end of that 2 years, I ended up meeting a guy that had the license, but had no crew, and he wanted to retire. So I said, oh man, this might work out. So we did like 2 or 3 jobs for him, and he says, you know what, let's, and he beat me up on price too. That's another thing. Like the whole time he was like, I don't know, you can do it for cheaper. And I was like, okay, yeah, you've got more experience than me. Not knowing that he was doing it all on purpose, right? To take me to the point where I didn't have an option but to work for him, right? Hindsight, I figured all that out. But that was the whole thing, was I did a couple jobs for him because, again, I needed to keep my guys busy. So I just agreed to whatever he told me I should be getting paid. We do real high quality work, and then him and I come to an agreement and a decision that he will absorb my crew and my company, and I will be his project or his general manager for 3 years. We decided on 3 years, and I would stay there, build the business up, and then he would retire. I would be able to get my own license because you needed a certain amount of experience. So I would be able to get my license after being underneath a licensed contractor for so long. And then I would take over his company and he would retire. So that's,
Before we go into what happened, I want to recap. Because I have a feeling this story isn't going to turn out the way.
Yeah, right.
Everybody's like, oh, happy ending.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. And I have no foreknowledge of this, so this will be interesting.
Yeah.
But we did an episode of this podcast a couple of episodes back where we talked about mistakes and avoiding those mistakes.
Yep.
And why businesses fail. And you touched on a couple of things. Yeah, you touched on a lot of them. But instead of it being reasons why you fell, it's reasons why you're sitting here successful now.
That's it.
When you look at it. And a couple of those, is not knowing your worth, or being afraid to charge your worth.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's definitely I think a lot of new business owners don't understand that, especially if you're not in an established type of industry that has set standards.
Exactly.
Right? Like auto mechanics there's a book you can literally go to that says, here's how long this job should take. Here's how much everybody's charging.
Yep.
Like, I make money if I do it faster. I lose money if I do it slower.
Yep.
Right? Even in the print industry, there's some standards that you can look at. Even if you go to the competitor, if you go to the Vista Print and say, this is how much this thing costs, at least I have a reference. Right?
Exactly.
But when you're doing something that is like, hey, tell me how much this thing should cost. Like, I remember I do remodeling too, but I do my own remodeling for my stuff, right?
Yeah.
We had an insurance claim on our cabin up in Tennessee.
Oh, jeez.
And so the insurance guy was like, well, tell me how much, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. He goes, well, just kind of guess about how much it would be, for you and a helper and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, and I told him the number. He's like, yeah, that sounds about right. And I'm like, I just shot myself in the foot. There's no way I told this guy enough money.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a lot when I said it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. It was nowhere near what I should have told him it was. And so you hit on that. But then, and again, I know the story's not going to turn out the way we would all hope it would. But the other thing that we talked about on an episode was, finding someone that already has the experience.
Yeah.
And jumping on their coattails.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lesson that's so important. Now, you're going to tell us to get in with the right people, but it's so important if you can find someone that feels that thing that you don't have. It's a lot with real estate investing. I do a lot of real estate investing. And you can't get a loan if you don't have experience.
Yep.
And nobody wants to get in business with you if you don't have the money, you don't have the experience. And so
Exactly.
you have to really work hard to find those people who are like, okay, I trust in what you're saying, what you're doing, and,
Yep.
and we'll go anyway. So yeah, that's what I wanted to bring back a couple of those points that you hit out because we had hit on that a couple of.
Well, and I'm sure, we'll let you just tell your side of what happened, or not your side, what happened.
Yeah.
History is written by the victors.
Yeah,
Right?
but I even think no matter where this is going, obviously I'm your friend, so I know where this is going. But even despite what you're going to talk about, what happened, I think you could probably even say you probably still did learn some things, maybe
1,000%
from that
Yeah.
experience. Like with him and even what knowledge he was able to pass down.
Totally.
So there's always, even in the bad,
No, yeah, and I'll explain all that,
Yeah.
but that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing as a business owner or even an individual is you can't, if you make a mistake or you fail, you can't look at it as, oh, that's it, I'm terrible, I'm done, and then
Yep.
just give up. If you can turn it around and say, okay, well, look, what I did learn was don't do that again. But at
Don't
touch
touch the stove twice.
Yeah, exactly. I know that next time,
Yep.
I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and just do it again. Don't just stop. Don't stop trying because you messed up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's a huge thing that everybody, again, business owners, but also just in personal,
Yep.
in your personal life, something to think about. But yeah, so 2 years I did that. I signed up with this guy, and I was like, a brand new recruit right out of boot camp, right? I was like, oh, this is it. I'm going to do everything I can. This is going to be the best thing that ever happened to me. And so my sign-on, salary with him, right, was $300 a week, okay? Which is nothing, right? $300 a week plus he was going to give me a percentage of whatever the total revenue was for the month, which at the time wasn't a lot, right? And the percentage was small. So I think I was averaging like, I don't know, $500 or $600 a week was my total, and I was only getting $300 a week. And then at the end of the month, I would get a small check commission.
That's not a lot for a family to live on. So
It's not enough for anything.
At this time, you are married,
I am married.
and she. Now I know what she does. Was she doing that at the time?
So she was in school. So we
Okay.
were getting her GI Bill money,
Okay.
right? But that was only enough to cover a mortgage, right? So I've always been okay with my money, right? We live below our means and make sure that we're able to. I'm not out, at the clubs every weekend and spending a bunch of money. We're pretty easy, laid back going, So we don't spend a lot of money that we don't need to spend. So yeah, but $300 a week coming from zero, right? Like when I was working for myself, I was making $0, but I just didn't know it. You know what I mean? It just constantly, it was terrible. So, and I was actually, when I owned my first company, I was Ubering every weekend to cover the difference, right? So I would go out and Uber up in Gainesville from 6 o'clock Friday night to 4 a.m. Saturday morning, and then again Saturday night to Sunday morning, just to make a couple extra $100 on the weekends so that we had groceries. You know what I mean? So I sign up with him. I'm doing that, and again, it's some sort of money. So and it's steady, which before it wasn't, right? So I was like, all right, I can work with this. I'm going to make this company amazing, right? And I had all these ideas and all this stuff, and this guy had been in business and failed once before. He had retired at like 30 something and then lost everything in 2008 or whatever. So he had to restart, right? Mm-hmm. So he's been in business. He's been through a lot of things. So every time that I come to him with this crazy idea, he goes, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to keep doing what we're doing and only what we're doing, because he was very conservative. You know what I mean? He didn't want to lose everything again, which that is something that I did learn, to kind of plan these things out a little bit more strategically than just, pull the trigger on every idea I have, right? So anyway, I do that for first couple months. I'm super excited about everything, and then I can slowly start seeing the promises that he had made just kind of fall apart, right? He would say, oh, we're going to do this, and then it would never happen, and same thing to the employees. He'd tell them this, and then that would never happen. We'd lose an employee. They quit. He fired a couple of guys that I had that were really great. And again, that was a good idea though. I was paying them and I didn't have any money. So why did I keep them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just kept them because I
Loyalty.
couldn't. Yeah, I didn't understand business. I told them I would give them a job and pay them. I'm not going to let them go for being good employees. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm an idiot. So, but again, mistake from a business owner standpoint. If you're not making money, that's the stupidest thing you can do, right? So anyway, he let them go. I see all these promises fall apart, and essentially for the next 2 years, like after the first year, the following 2 years was kind of I did what I had to do, and I did learn a lot because I did not know how to build a house down here. I knew how to build a house up north. So it's completely different down here. There's so many other avenues and things that you got to pay attention to because of the hurricanes that are different from snow load, right?
Yeah.
Which is what I'm used to. So I did learn all of that, learn the whole process, and did get the experience to get my license. So we get to the end, the last year that I'm working for him, it's on and off. Like a couple of months before we parted ways or decided to part ways, he goes, hey, actually about a year before we parted ways, he goes, hey, we're going to, I'm giving you the business and I want to do it within the next 3 months. I want to get out of this and it's all yours. And I said, okay, perfect. So he's like, but I can't give you this name. You have to get your own name. And then I'll transfer everything over to that name. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. But okay, whatever. I was all about it. I got P.O. Box, started getting names set up, everything. And then 2 or 3 months later, he's like, you know what? I maybe not yet. All right, let's wait till the end of the year. And it was back and forth like that all year. And then at the end of the year, we sit down and he goes, hey, I can't do it. I cannot give you the business. I need to keep making money with it and everything. And he's like, but what he said was, I want to keep you on as a consultant. I'll pay you $1,000 a week and keep you on as a consultant as a salary because he owed me a ton of money from bonuses that I never got paid out, right? So he said, instead, rather than pay you that lump sum of money, I'll pay you for a whole year. I'll pay you $52,000 over the year as passive, just so that I can ask you questions for my new project manager when is needed, right? Because I told him I started my own company. I'm not going to be here much longer. So he had hired a project manager to replace me. I trained him and then slowly started going away until one day it just nothing. No phone calls, no pay. Everything was cut off, deleted me from everything in the company, and that was it. Never. I literally to this day haven't spoken to him. He never once got back to me, never explained why he stopped paying me, all the money that I was owed, everything. I finished one job and never heard from him again. So I really had to put all my cards, over and start my stuff 100%. So the day that we stopped talking, I scheduled my test and took my contractor's license and got that. And then, since then I've just been running on my own.
So what's the big lesson for people that get into that kind of partnership to protect themselves?
Okay, so we signed an agreement, right? It was a 1-page agreement that we both signed, and it was not a legal document. It was just when we first started, he said, hey, what I want you to do is take time and write down what you think this is going to look like. So he said, it's called a letter of understanding. He said, just put on a piece of paper what you think this is going to be. So my naive self, I wrote, man, I'm going to keep my company. You're going to pay me through that company, and I'm going to manage your company for 3 years, and then you're going to give it to me, right? Essentially. Yeah. We both signed it, and then, 3 months in, he stopped paying that company. He was just paying, I was an employee. The whole company got shut down. So at that point, now it's really not even legal. You know what I mean? Because we had already switched from what it was supposed to be. So if I wanted to follow up in court with something, it wasn't even legal. Wasn't going to be something that would hold up in court.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, definitely get an agreement and
get a lawyer to write it up.
Yeah, but also, even if you don't get a lawyer to write it up, you can go on Google, which I've done because I have several other companies now that I have partners in.
LegalZoom.
Yeah, well, yeah, and just get a partnership agreement, and all of the main stuff is on there. If there's specific stuff, you might need to get a lawyer, but the main stuff is there. Hey, we're gonna do this for this long, and at this date, we're gonna split up or whatever. It's all on there, very specifically. Make sure you get it notarized and then recorded at your county clerk. That's a big one. If you can do that, then you're pretty much safe. If there's a falling out or something. But anyway, yeah, do that, but also. You know, kind of vet the guys. I didn't do that. I didn't have an option. My company was failing. I didn't want to admit it. You know what I mean? I was too immature, I think, to admit that my company was failing. So I needed to keep my guys busy. I just jumped in head first and signed everything and said, yep, let's do this. So I wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? I would do quite a bit more vetting. There would, especially even the people that I'm with now, you know, there's a lot of conversations before. It's not just one conversation, fill out a piece of paperwork and get to work. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's a lot. Yeah. So, and yeah, to your point though, the whole, at the beginning, you said something about the mistakes and that whole situation, even though it didn't end the way I wanted it to, I would not be where I am right now without signing with that guy. Okay. I gained so much experience, both in the construction industry, how to build the houses, how not to, because there was some stuff that he did that I didn't like doing. But I learned how not to do that. I learned how to write up contracts. I learned how to manage clients better. I learned a lot. Yeah. You know, again, it was just a big bill of education. You know, I lost a lot of money doing that, but I also learned a lot, so it was totally worth it. You know what I mean? Yep,
for sure.
Yeah.
So you go through that. Now you got, at that point now you can get your license, right?
Yep. So the second he stops talking to me, I schedule my test and take it the next week. There's three-day long tests. It's ridiculous. Took them all, passed them all, and then applied for my license immediately. So.
And then now you got CBI construction.
CBI contracting, yes.
Or contracting, sorry. The mic is blocking.
Yeah.
What does CBI stand for?
It's so stupid. So my first time, the first business.
I'm going to tell your wife you said that.
The first business I owned was called ProView, right? And I spent like weeks coming up with the best name that I could and I thought that was the most luxurious title. I spent a lot of time on the logo, even though it was just the name. It was so stupid. But anyway, this time I said, something that I learned from that guy was the name does not freaking matter, okay? Like, it's 1% of your problem. So I just said, okay, my name is Chayton, my wife's name is Brooke, and my daughter's name was Isla. So CBI contracting. And construction was taken, so contracting it is. So I did that. And then now it kind of worked out because we had my son, and he's Chayton Jr., so now it's him, my wife, and my daughter. So, yep.
I was going to say, you can add another C to that, or no?
No, that's it. If we were to have another girl, we couldn't find any C names, so I was going to have to start a new business or add a letter somewhere. So it worked out. I was like, all right, good, now we're done.
So what do you do now with CBI then?
So yeah, now we do custom homes and renovations, remodels, mainly. So we do also, actually, I just recently got my commercial license, so we're doing some commercial remodeling, and we'll eventually get into commercial ground up. I've done a couple of those, but not enough to be 100% confident with, you know, doing it on my own. I had done it with somebody else, so I need a little bit more remodel experience to go full-fledged on that. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing right now.
And then on the consulting side, like how does that work?
Okay, so that is a whole nother thing that we don't do much with that at the moment. We did a couple things last year. I know we had met with you about some of that stuff. But what happens is the contracting company is not 100% self-sufficient at the moment. It still requires my time. And it is also what generates most of my income at the moment. So I can't take all my time away from that, right? Which is what I did at the beginning. So I said, all right, I'm gonna start another company. And then I went and focused on that, and then noticed that a couple of things were falling apart over here. So the consulting company right now is actually mostly construction stuff. I consult with investors and owner builders at the moment. That's what's going through that company. it was originally set up to consult with other companies and help them set up systems within their business, because my partner, my brother, is a whiz at setting up automations online and all that stuff. So he can connect anything and code it to just, it's ridiculous. So that's what it was set up to do. He is sidetracked with his current position in his company. And so we said, let's kind of take a break and get our companies self-sufficient and established before we kind of, jump over, which is something that I've learned over the 8 years that I've been in business now, is as soon as you lose attention on something that's not ready to be, on its own, it falls apart quickly. So,
So with the construction, y'all doing ground up? Are you subbing out anything?
all ground up and probably about 50-50 sub, and I have an in-house team right now. So I've got a really great manager, and then a really good crew. It's 2-guy crew, but they're, all the finish work we do ourselves and some of the framing and stuff like that. Really great. I mean, we are knocking some stuff out right now.
What areas in Ocala y'all working? Because everything I see are like these big. I live in one of them. The big, builders that are throwing up neighborhoods.
Lennar and all those big
DR
guys.
Horton, all of them.
Yeah. No, we. So I don't do that yet. That's something in the future I would like to have my own development. It won't be quite what they're doing because I don't agree with a lot of that stuff. But it's custom homes and it's sprinkled all over the county. We're actually in Winter Garden right now down by Orlando. And then Reddick, Florida, where we've got some in Leesburg, like everywhere, essentially in between. There's a lot going on.
So let me ask you this, and this is just personal curiosity, cost-wise.
Yeah.
Right? When it comes to a custom home compared to one of these big builders throwing up a neighborhood, what is somebody looking at difference in cost?
A lot. I can't. So that's the one question that for anybody listening, if you're looking to build a house, do not go to your builder and ask what their per square foot price is, because there's no, if you're trying to get a custom home, if you're trying to build one of their models, then they can tell you immediately because they've built it 100 times. Yeah. You know what I mean? They can put it in their calculator and tell you immediately what that price is. But for somebody like me, who every single house that I build is different, somebody brings me a set of plans or I draw up the plans completely custom, I do not have a per square foot price. All I know is I use my lowest standard that I'm willing to do is quite a bit more expensive than what the all those big builders are doing. I'm not using the materials that they use. The materials alone that I use are quite a bit more cost. So, and also, they buy a train load of plywood at a time, right? So they're getting plywood for $8 a sheet, and I'm paying 40. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So their prices, there's just no way to compete with that. For somebody like me, that's why I only build custom homes, and my clientele are people who, not necessarily don't have, a never-ending budget, but they're willing to spend a little more to get something that they don't have to worry about in the future. You know what I mean? So that's. Didn't really answer your question, but it is.
Oh no,
it is.
That was the point I was getting at.
Yeah.
He's the type that does the hidden pantries, hidden rooms.
Yeah.
Push a button on the countertop and it raises up, and
Yeah, we do quite a lot of really cool custom stuff, and that's the stuff I like to do, because if I were building the same home every single day, I would get so bored. Like,
well, you get bored. You start taking shortcuts, which is what all these big builders do.
Yeah.
I know. I live in one of those houses. I see the shortcuts all the time.
That's it. Yeah.
I have fixed a lot of those shortcuts.
Exactly. And to be honest, when I had first, way back when I was first doing it by myself for those 2 years, all the time I would do shortcuts because I didn't have any money left and I had to finish the job. So it wouldn't really be a shortcut. It just would be less than what I wanted it to be. And I would leave most of my jobs unhappy. The clients may have been happy, but I would leave unhappy, and I would always, not always, most of the time though, I know that I was going to get called back because we had left something just because I needed to get out and get a check. So I would always get called back, and there was no pricing in that. You know what I mean? All the callbacks alone were ridiculous because every single time I'd get in the truck and go to a house, I'm losing money. So it was, but that's what happens to a lot of these handymen or, remodelers and that's why you'll have problems with them towards the ends of jobs, because they're just trying to get their check to move on to the next one, and then getting them back is ridiculous. And you find out, like, I think it happened to you, at the end of the job, you get a bill and you're like, why is this higher than what you bid?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they don't know. You know what I mean? There's just no experience there.
Yeah.
So when you got 3 bids and one of them was way higher, it's because not always, I won't say all the time, but 90% of times, because that guy actually knows what he's doing, right?
Or he's trying to bid it so high you don't hire him.
You don't have to do it. Yeah, and I do that too. There's a lot of times that, I'll talk to a client, I'm like, nope. And in the past, instead of saying, sorry, I don't think this is going to be a good fit, now I do that because it's just the right, they might be a little upset at first, but at least they're not, I don't get stuck working for somebody that I know is not going to be a good fit for my company. So, now I'll say that up front, but I used to I'd bid a job as high as I could, and then they'd say yes, and you go, crap, now I got to, now I got to deal with them for 7 months.
You already know this person's going to be a headache because just in this portion, they're like, oh, what about this? And it's like, no, that's not how it works.
Exactly. Yeah. And and I mean, I'm finishing up a couple of those right now from before, like a year ago, that we're still working on because I didn't do that. I was still alone last year, actually. I didn't have any employees last year. It was just me. And then since then, I've got a project manager and a crew. So it's a lot different now. So some of these jobs I'm still working on finishing up. I priced them out for just me. I had no overhead. You know what I mean? And now I'm like, okay, we got to get out of here so we can we can move on and be done. But yeah.
So to wrap things up, you've kind of gone full circle from the I guess the downfalls and things that you did know. Now you had to take some pretty tough hits along the way. But one thing you did say is, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but basically you said, if I had to do it again, I could do it over. Or I can't remember how you verbalized it, but you said something to that effect. So
I absolutely would not be where I'm at right now without doing all of those things that I did incorrectly, right? And learning from them. And if I had the opportunity to do it all again, I may tweak a little bit of it, but to know what I know now and be where I'm at, I'm 100% happy with all of it. You know what I mean?
So say the current Goose gets to go back to 20 or something year old Goose that when you first try to start your first business. Mm-hmm. If you could pick one, maybe you can't pick one, maybe two, whatever it is you think, if it's one or two, what do you think is the most thing that's your either knowledge or a skill that you think that Goose should have had back then to get you where you needed to be?
What you had said earlier, which was riding somebody's coattails. But I'll take it a step further and getting somebody in that space that knows what they're doing, and I'll call it a coach, but getting a coach, right? Getting even.
Preach it.
Yep, and I legitimately, I just signed up for a building company coach like 3 weeks ago. I'm still learning, and so I've gotten them. And since then, I have implemented so many different things in my company that have increased productivity and we're already making more money just 3 weeks later, right? So absolutely, if I could do it all over again, I would go right back and say, hire them right now. Get a coach right now that will help you. It costs money. But if you get the right one, if you do your research and you get the right person to help you, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
I know it's hard up front because, when I didn't have any money, my wife was in college but if, the other thing I would have done is stayed with that W-2 job as long as I could, right? Until I absolutely could not fit it into my schedule anymore to work a 40-hour week and then do my business on the side. I would have done that as long as I could with a coach, because then I've got the money to pay the coach, and you know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. Those two things. Those are the two things. Hold on to your W-2 as long as you can while you're working all the kinks out, because if you just go full in, then you got to be ready.
Yeah.
You're gonna learn how to swim real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that take the opposite approach. Dive right into it, but there's just so much stress that you could
and risk
so much. Yeah. And that's the whole reason I set up with this coach right now, right? And I told them, they said, why now? I've been on their mailing list for 4 years, right? They put out an ad a while back that gave me a free template for something. And for 4 years, I've been getting emails from them. They're like, why now? And I was like, I've got 2 kids and a wife now. I didn't have that back then. I just had the wife. And we were both working, so whatever. But anyway, I've got 2 kids and a wife, and I am sick and tired of staying up all night because I cannot stop thinking about something at work. It's just killing me. So I said, you know what? I'm done with the stress. I'm done with all that. I'm going to pay somebody to help me. I have all these ideas, but I have no organization, right? They sit down and they said, hey, I see where you're at. This is step one. That's all I needed. Since then, it's been, okay, now I know. But I didn't know what step one was, right? So having that coach is the most, the best investment I've made so far. In the 8 years that I've been in business, paying for a coach was the best thing that I've ever done.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yep.
That's a good way to end that.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you for coming on.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, I think there's a lot of knowledge that people can take from this episode for sure. Just, you know, the different things that you had to end up enduring going through your entrepreneur journey.
Absolutely.
You know, wasn't the most ideal, but I think looking back now, obviously, it was probably the best for you.
Yeah.
And
I
think,
wouldn't do it any other way. You know what I mean?
and you mentioned one thing that I think that most people can really take is that, you know, when you take the hits, don't just quit right then and there.
No.
Like that's when you got to dig in, take the knowledge, move forward and implement that new knowledge now you have in your mind and utilize it to then make it a success.
Absolutely.
So
It takes years to become an overnight success.
yes,
Right?
yeah, exactly. So I appreciate you being on, and again, thank you guys for watching. And make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. And we would love to hear any comments you got or questions, and love to answer those. And next time, I think we got a guest coming in. He's a realtor. We'll be talking about his journey. And until next time, let's grow together.
It's time to step up, yeah. It's grind time, no more letting up. No, running faster, further, no more running up. Yeah, giving my all, no more giving up. Listen to me.